I'd like to welcome you to the 27th Annual State of Missoula, sponsored by the Missoula Area Chamber of Commerce. Welcome. We'll talk today a little bit about water, how it affects business in Missoula, and have a pretty good presentation today. So thank you all for coming. How was the food? Pretty good? All right, great. First thing I'd like to do is thank our sponsors, Culligan Water Company, Wanda Brevard and Perry and Gabe for being a sponsor, Partners Creative, Susan Ash and Sean, and then WGM Group for providing the door prize. And so what I'd like to do is just move over here for a second. No, we'll get to the sponsors at the end too. So y'all have one of these? All right. Can you all turn it back towards you like this? You can see the end of it. Okay. I want you to think about this as the water supply for Missoula, or the water in the Clark Fork River. And the water that we have to use is represented by that bottle. We only have a certain amount of water, and we're going to talk to you about how it's allocated and how we use it and how we manage it in the Missoula Basin and what it means to us. Does anybody have a water bottle without water in it? All right, you have the door prize. All right, now I have no idea how you're going to get your ticket out of that water bottle, but we'll let you work that out. But in there is a ticket to the Economic Outlook Seminar that's sponsored by the Bureau of Business and Economic Research. January, what day, Paul? Next Friday. All right, next Friday at the Hilton Garden Inn. So thank you for coming. And what I'd like to do now is to move to the Pledge of Allegiance. So John Wilkins, member of the City Council and veteran, would you lead us, please, in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, John. What I'd like to do now is briefly introduce the head table and our speakers. So to my immediate right is John Brower, who's the chairman of the Missoula Area Chamber of Commerce, and will be our first speaker today. Next to him is Director Emeritus, Professor Paul Polzin. I think Paul probably doesn't need an introduction. And then the CEO of Mountain Water Company, Mr. John Kappas, sits at the end of the table. So Sarah, if you'd boot up the slides. Sarah. Thank you. Okay. I'd like to talk to you just a tiny bit now about water. So, the Clark Fork River supplies the water to the Missoula Valley. The headwaters of the Clark Fork River are in Butte, Montana, and then they exit the state out on this end. Several years ago, DNRC looked at the water in the Clark Fork River, and they made the decision that all of the water in the river has been appropriated. In other words, every drop of water that can be used for agriculture or business or power production or watering your lawns or for drinking water or for preparing our meals today has been accounted for in the Clark Fork Basin. We were used to the ability to just drill a well whenever we wanted to drill a well, or to put in a water system for a suburban development when we wanted to build a water system, or put in a water system for industry, business and industry. So historically in Missoula, what we had was industries that revolved around the supply of water. So in Columbia Falls, there was a dam and power production and an aluminum company plant at one time. In Missoula, we floated logs down the river to sawmills that were at one time powered by water, and then we built a dam. And water power provided the electricity to the Missoula community. So as we move into the new decade, right, and we say, do we really have water for what we need in the future, and how is it allocated? Those are important questions for business. Because new business is being attracted to Missoula, existing businesses need to expand. Can I have my next slide? So if you look at this and pretend that what we all know of as a pie chart is actually the end of that bottle of water, right? And you think about the water claims in the Missoula Valley, right, or on the Clark Fork River Basin in total, about 46% of the total claims, right, are for domestic lawn and garden, 25% for stock, and 20% for irrigation. This is the total number of claims. 21,000 water right claims, about 46% for domestic lawn, 25% for stock water and irrigation. Industrial is about 1%, okay? Could we go to the next slide, please? But now if you think about the volume of water in that water bottle and who has the volume of water in this closed system, you'll see that irrigation users have about 36%, that fish, wildlife, and parks have about 57% of the volume of water in the Clark Fork drainage. And then we come up and we look at recreation stock, which is about 1%, lawn and garden, remember the most number of claims, but only 2% of the volume of water. Mining about 1%. Institutional, municipal, and commercial is actually so small, right, that we can't hardly measure it, but then industrial is about 2%. So if you are a business person and you're thinking about expanding your company, right, are you going to expand within the service area of Mountain Water Company? Will they be able to serve you? And John will talk about that. Or are you going to pick a place outlying that's not connected to Mountain Water Company, and how will you get the water right that you may need for your employees as part of that sort of business decision? Next slide, please. So the surface water, which is the Clark Fork River, is connected to the groundwater. If you need a water right, all right, you need to get a new appropriation to use that water, whether it's groundwater or whether it's surface water. So right now, you can drill a well and you can take out less than 35 gallons a minute and use it for a domestic or for a business, okay? Anything over that, which would be, say, 23 employees, you have to get a water right. The only way to get a water right is to buy one from someone else in the basin. That process is going to take you over a year and probably cost you over $100,000. This little exempt well that I just talked about has been a topic of extensive conversation at the state level. During the next legislative session, right, the ability to drill your own well for your own home or your own business may go away. And that may require a water right. And that process may take a lot of time and be fairly expensive. Okay. Next slide. All right, so finding new sources of water for growth. We're not going to find new sources of water for growth. God really isn't making any more water. It's sort of like lake frontage. So what we have to do is figure out how to work together to use that water. So we're not going to find new groundwater that's not connected to surface water. It's not going to happen. The volume we have in the Clark Fork River is the volume we have. If you want business or residential water outside of an existing water right, you're going to have to purchase that. Here's the trade-off. Okay, so each new home means a half to an acre that we would take out of agricultural irrigation. All right, remember we're trading water now. Water is a fixed supply for us. We could locate a commercial or industrial user where there's a water right for purchase. So we have an opportunity with the old Smurfit Stone site because they have a large well and water rights. So that's a location we could go to. Not many places outside of that. So municipal use is year-round, residential use and commercial use is year-round, but we have to mitigate if we buy a farmer's right because they use their water over a 9-month period, not over a 12-month period, right? So there's a number of factors that we have to consider. Work with local and state government, with our ranching partners, as well as our municipalities, in this case our water company, all right, to address the needs and demands for the future. And so that's the introduction to today's program. Thank you. So what we're going to do today is, following the presentation by the 3 speakers, each table will take about 10 minutes. And I want you to develop about 3 questions based on the information you heard from the speakers today. We'll pass the microphone around and then ask questions at the end of the day. And I also want you to think about what could be a topic for this presentation in future years when we do the state of Montana. So we'll break right into our speakers at this time. And first person I'd like to introduce is John Brower. John is with Windermere Realty in Missoula. He's a native Missoulian and a 3rd-generation Montanan. He graduated from the University of Montana with a BS in business in 1985. John is a past president of the Missoula Organization of Realtors and has been active in the community for many years. He is currently the managing broker of Windermere Real Estate, and John lives in Missoula with his wife of 26 years, Kathy. They have 2 children, Tara and Brent, both attending the University of Montana, and one out there is a teacher, John Brower. Come on up.
Thank you very much, Nick. And thanks to all of you for attending today on this beautiful, snowy Montana afternoon. My board of directors and I thought, since we had you all held captive here today, it would be a great opportunity to share our strategic plan once again with you, and more importantly, share some of the accomplishments that we've made under that strategic plan since we began the implementation process of this plan beginning in July of last year. So just a couple of quick facts about the Chamber before we get into the strategic plan review. We are still Missoula's largest business organization. We have about 800 members, long or short of, at any given time, representing about 20,000 plus employees in the area. We have 18 board of directors, 5 divisions, 12 committees, 5 business networking groups, 6 full-time and 1 part-time staff person. In the development of our strategic plan, and for any strategic plan for that matter, you always create a long-term and a short-term vision, mission that is based on a set of core values. Our vision and mission statement are on the board right now for you, and I'd just like to share them with you for just a minute. And our vision states is that we will be a leading catalyst in creating a cooperative and prosperous community which inspires and motivates the majority of area businesses to invest their resources with the Chamber in helping build Missoula's future. Long term, 10 years plus. Short term, our mission. We preserve and advance the quality of life in Missoula by advocating for a healthy, responsible, diverse business environment and by providing resources that help businesses succeed. Once again, we started the strategic planning process in the spring of 2010, and we're just now in the implementation phase of that. As I mentioned before as well, this strategic plan was based on 6 very simple core values. As I get to these core values, we're going to display our definition of the core values on the left-hand side of the screen, and then I'm going to relate the committee work and the accomplishments to each of those core values as we go through the next 6 slides. So our core values defined or core values identified are advocacy, expertise, collaboration, leadership, connection, and innovation. Under our first core value, advocacy, is our Governmental Affairs Committee. And for those of you who are unaware, we have just recently hired a new 3/4-time Governmental Affairs Relations Liaison, and his name is Steve Maurer. Steve, are you out there somewhere? Raise your hand real quick, will you? Thanks. Thanks, Steve. Steve's job will be to monitor local, state, and federal issues that affect business. Some of the accomplishments that we've already been able to achieve are our involvement in the sign ordinance regulation, our involvement in the College of Technology, and advocating for the city's acquisition of the Civic Baseball Stadium. Our goal within our advocacy is really to establish much better relationships with local government. And we've attempted to do so by setting up biannual meetings with the county commissioners and quarterly meetings with the city council. One of the striking things about our meeting with the commissioners recently is we found that we really didn't even share information. And we're going to do a much better job of that moving forward, and we really believe that we can accomplish a lot with their help as well. Another thing, very quickly, it's very nice to see so many of our local government officials here today. We really appreciate you being here. Okay? Under our next core value, expertise, is our board of directors. we have a very strong board of directors in this organization. We have 18 members in our board, which sometimes is a task. However, they come from very diverse business environments, and we've created a matrix within our organization so that we can appeal to those various industries and try to get them a very diverse board built. Our members are a resource to us. They're diverse businesses, and they do provide us with a wide insight on a range of issues. Staff is also a very important part of our expertise core value, and they present a multifaceted number of issues without bias as well to our membership, and we draw credible information from sources and then let our membership make their decisions and establish whatever stance it is that they may have on those issues. So that's our expertise core value. Our collaboration core value is one of the most important to us, and this is where we're reaching out and trying to establish relationships with so many organizations in our community. One of the examples of that would be the partnership that we've had with MDA to help with the urban streetcar project and the Karis Park improvements. We've also been a valued partner in the Visitor Information Center at the Missoula International Airport. And that was also a collaboration between the Missoula Development or Missoula Downtown Association and Convention and Visitors Bureau. We're currently trying to identify a number of opportunities, and very successfully so, that we can work with the Missoula Economic Partnership. And we will, and we promise that we will continue to support them in any way that they find necessary, so that we can build a more successful business environment. We believe in the Missoula Economic Partnership. Some of the community support that we've provided is, and these are just to name a few, are the American Red Cross, Outward Bound for Veterans, and the Festival for Trees. And those have all occurred also since implementation in July. Under our leadership core value, we have our Workforce and Development and Education Committee. Wolf Amischbichler has been the chairperson for our Workforce Development Committee and has done an excellent job of forging a relationship between the Chamber and the Missoula County Public School System. We've been very pleased to be able to advocate for Graduation Matters and 21st Century School programs. We've been in support of the Health Sciences Academy at Big Sky High School. We've mentored and job shadowed for senior projects for Missoula County Public Schools, and we've been involved in COT curriculum surrounding the new Revit technology, which we understand will replace CAD technology as we know it today. We're enhancing the quality of life in Missoula and keeping leaders involved in the community. And there is no more shining example of that than our Leadership Missoula program in its 29th year. Could I get maybe a show of hands of how many people out there have gone through Leadership Missoula? It's amazing. That is really amazing. Good on you. We really believe in this program. It's been very successful for us. And this year's class, I believe, was 42 or 43 people. So it's been great. Under our connection core value, we have business networking groups and our BOSS program. We have our chamber website with 2,000 visits per month, 70% of which are coming via search engine. We have our business after hours program, connecting over 200 business people the first Tuesday of every month. I don't know how many of you attended the airport function last week, but we had, I think, approximately 270 on our head count out there. So this is a really great opportunity for business people to network. We have listening sessions that we're conducting by industry, and our executive officer, Kim Luttrell, is out there talking to realtors right now. We're going to expand this into nonprofits and technology-related industries as well. Our educational and community forums remain strong with Eggs and Issues on timely topics, and then, of course, our event today, our Commerce Report, or State of Missoula. Under our innovation core value is once again our relationship with the Missoula Economic Partnership. We've shared resources to jumpstart organizations' informational needs. We've surveyed our members. We're sharing leads of businesses that have growth potential. And we've got an excellent relationship built with MEP, and likewise, they've been very supportive of us as well. Our Business and Community Development Committee is conducting economic gardening research, representing lifestyle businesses, and also identifying those stage 1 entrepreneurs so that we can potentially grow jobs and employment in our workplace as well. Our Workforce Development and Education Committee connects all levels of education with business in identifying workforce issues and needs. So, our strength. Our strength is that the Chamber provides a wide range of resources to our membership, sharing well-researched information and networking opportunities that strengthen connections between business and generate commerce in Missoula. We're trying our best to foster a healthy business environment. And one of the themes and the underlying themes of this Chamber of Commerce, even before the start of our strategic plan, is that without business, there is no community. And it's been a very strong belief and a fundamental belief of this Chamber, and still is, also under our strategic plan. We believe that a healthy, attractive environment for business is essential to a healthy community, and by advocating for our diverse membership, we work to create an atmosphere where business can start, grow, and thrive for the betterment as Missoula as a whole. The Chamber does work for Missoula. We keep our members informed. Business leaders are often too busy to check on the issues that affect their businesses daily, and we do an excellent job right now with not only our Governmental Affairs Committee, but so many others in trying to keep our business people informed and speak on behalf of our membership when it's appropriate. We follow legislative and local issues that may impact business and alert members. So this is my opportunity to ask you to become involved. We have been trying to reach out for quite some time to increase the diversity on our committees. We have lots of opportunity available to us for a committee, and we are very anxious to see more volunteers come forward so that we can promote our organization and the will, essentially, of our membership. So we're welcoming to everyone. Everyone is welcome to join the Chamber. Our goals and strategies are shaped by our local membership. We encourage anyone investing in a better Missoula to join our membership and help define the voice and the direction of our business community. Last but not least, thanks for being here. We really do appreciate your support as a community investor and your continued support of the Chamber. All we want in the end is for Missoula to remain an attractive place to live, work, learn, and play. And more importantly, through this strategic plan, we want to add value to your membership so that when you sit down every year to write that check, that you know that there's value in it for you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, John. So, who's here today? We talked about the Missoula Area Chamber of Commerce. We talked about local government. The Missoula Economic Partnership. James Grunke, nice to have you here. The Missoula Organization of Realtors, spread out throughout the whole room. The Missoula Building Industry Association. Kathy Greathouse back in this corner. MDSC, great grants for local businesses. Missoula Job Service, and Wolf is down here in front. The Clark Fork Coalition, Grant, it's nice to see you here. Great job keeping our quality of life and what makes Missoula, Missoula. The Five Valleys Land Trust, and of course the University of Montana. All of that together is part of quality of life and part of community in Missoula. Business is an important part of that. How many people moved here from someplace else? All right. And I would expect that other people are going to move here. When they get here, we need to preserve for them our quality of life, the things that were here before they got here, right? And things that will be here for them and for their children. Water is part of that. But let's learn a little bit about what's going to happen in the future. Our next speaker really doesn't need an introduction, but I will anyway. Professor Paul Polzin, Director Emeritus at the Bureau of Business and Economic Research. 46 years in the business, studying the economy of the state of Montana, reporting through your economic outlook seminars in 9 different locations across the state of Montana. We're going to give you the microphone, Paul, and we're going to let you talk to us about where we're going and what we should be concerned about. So come on up. Paul Polzin.
That is a very nice introduction, Nick. I was expecting something more like the last time you introduced me. As I remembered, it might have been in this building or in this room, it was noon service club. He got up and said, "It's not my job to give a long and boring talk about the economy. My job today is to introduce the person who will." Thank you, Nick. Actually, I'm the B team today. Pat Barkey, the current director of the Bureau, called in sick today and couldn't make it. He sends his regrets and he sends me in his place. I actually have 3 talks I always carry with me, and you can vote about which one you want to hear. One is economic highlights of 1997. The other is great moments in handball. And the third, which is the one Pat put together, housing, migration, and the recession. Obviously, this is what you want to hear, right? We had the census in 2010. That gave us a lot of good baseline data on population. So what I'm going to be spending most of the time today is talking about population trends, and also a little bit having to do with housing and a little bit having to do with migration. Do you have that thing or? Okay, well, what are the next? This is probably, I gotta be able to see that. What we have here are population trends and growth rates for the 1990s and the 2000s. And the interesting thing to see is that population growth rates have really decelerated from the 1990s to the 2000s. For example, from 1990 to 2000, Montana increased 12.9%. The current decade, that's down to 9.7%. As we look at the major cities across Montana, we start to see some very big differences. For example, here in Missoula, the population growth rate in the 1990s was almost 22%. In the current decade, or the decade just passed, it's down to 14%. That is probably the greatest deceleration in population growth among any of Montana's cities. For example, just look at Flathead. Flathead was 26%, it's now 22%. Yellowstone County, way down below. Last decade was 14%, this decade 14%. Gallatin County was 34%, now 32%. This, I think, represents a new reality for Missoula that we have got to keep in mind as we go forward. We are no longer this rapidly growing city that was occurring in the 1990s. Population does continue to increase, but at a much, much slower rate than it did, and we are growing at a slower rate, we'll see later on, than some of our other counterparts across the state. So start up the next slide. Here are some of the major points that Pat put together. Click it. Population growth just decelerated more than our peer cities. Go ahead. The migration effects have been impacted by the recession. We'll see that in just a couple of minutes. The University of Montana is a major, major influence on the population of Missoula and the composition of the population of Missoula. Next slide. Again, it's the aging of the baby boomers, the current recession, the housing bust, and the conditions in the construction and real estate industry continue to be the major feature of the recession and where we are right now in terms of the recovery. And if we're just narrowing our focus to western Montana, Missoula has probably fared better than some of our other rural counties here in western Montana. And housing will follow the recovery elsewhere in the economy. It will not lead the recovery. And also, Missoula is very closely linked to other counties here in western Montana. So let's look at population change in Montana 2000 to 2010. This is just Montana. The blue counties have had population declines. The yellow counties have had population increases. And hit the next one, you'll see one more. You can see that during that period, Missoula increased by 14%, Ravalli about 12%, Granite 8%, Mineral 9%, and Lake 8.5%. This just gives you an overview of what population has done here in Missoula County. We now have, in the 2010 census, about 109,300 people. And if you go all the way back to 1940, it was 29,000. And in 1970, about when I showed up, it was 58,000. Go ahead. If you walk away from anything today, this is the slide to walk away with. This is a net migration into Missoula County by year from 1991 to 2010. The blue lines represent net in-migration from other states. The red lines represent net migration from other counties, and the gold one represents net migration to adjacent counties, like Ravalli County, so forth and so forth. I think many people have the impression that we have a tremendous number of out-of-staters moving to Montana, and that we are having continue to have significant net in-migration. That definitely was true in the early 1990s. Look at all the people from other states who have moved to the net migration of people from other states who have moved to Missoula County. That has almost disappeared. It was actually net out migration in the late 90s, and it occurred a little bit in the mid-2000s, but at a much smaller scale. This is the reality of Missoula population growth. I think many people think that the 1990s continue to be the reality. We now have much less net in-migration, and it's not particularly coming from out of state. The people who are moving here from elsewhere in Montana, and you can see that the net migration to to adjacent counties continued throughout this period. These are the people moving from Missoula, moving to Ravalli County, to Lake County, Granite County. This is the suburbanization process here in Missoula. So this is the population growth reality that we are facing now. It is not the same as it was in the early 1990s. Next slide. When we look at the population here in Missoula County, at one point in time in 2010, it's what we call bimodal. There are two peaks, and this is where the University of Montana comes in. The University of Montana, with its large number of young people, means that when we look at the age bracket 20 to 29, there's a lot of them. The other modal, the other big bulge are the baby boomers. They're now 45 to 64. So when you're looking at who are the composition of population here in Missoula County, it has two peaks: the college students and also the baby boomers. And you can see that when you start looking at the various components of Missoula County. These are what we call the CCDs, the county census districts. You can see that Missoula County, the average age was a little over 30. But when we look at the Missoula CCD, That's the city of Missoula. That tends to be dominated by younger people. And when we go out to the Sealy Blackfoot area, you can see that the median age starts to rise very rapidly. Go ahead. The really interesting thing, and the real way in which you can kind of look at the interdependency between Missoula County and the other counties, is by looking at the journey to work data. 71% of the people who work in Missoula County live in Missoula County. But you can see that in each one of our adjacent counties, we have a significant number of workers who come into Missoula to work and then return back home every evening. The next one. And we can get another idea of how that works out by looking at this graph. This says that 83% of the people employed in Missoula County live in Missoula County. 26% of the people who live in Mineral County work in Missoula County, and so forth. 25% of the people who live in Ravalli County work in Missoula County. So one of the ways we have this regional interdependence has to do with the journey to work and people moving, or people traveling to work. Okay, next slide. Okay, now let's kind of switch over and kind of look at the recession impacts. What happened to house prices in various communities across the state? And this is also one measure of the severity of the recession. We'll look at another one. The fastest growing, before the recession began, Flathead County and Gallatin County were the fastest growing counties in the state, but they were also the ones most significantly impacted by the recession. And you can see that the house price declined were about 32% in Gallatin County, 21% in Flathead County. Missoula and Ravalli County are kind of intermediate, 17% in Ravalli County, 9% here. And you can see over in Cascade, Silver Bow, and Yellowstone counties, the price declines there were no price declines. They were approximately stable. Next slide. This is just another way of looking at the relatively slow growth that is the reality here in Missoula County. This is looking at the growth in all of our major cities from 2001 to 2007. This is the recovery phase of the last business cycle. This is before the current downturn began. Statewide growth was about 3.3%. You can see Flathead and Gallatin County were way above, but Missoula and Ravalli County were well below the statewide average and among the slowest growing in the state. So this new economic reality here in Missoula is not something that just recently happened. It was occurring during the recovery phase of the last cycle, 2001 to 2007. Next slide. Okay, what was happening to the various cities during the recession, during 2008 and 2009? You can see that the statewide economy declined by about 1.1%. The economies that declined the most were Flathead County, Gallatin County, and Ravalli County. The recession was much more severe in Ravalli County than it was here in Missoula County. Here in Missoula County, the overall decline was about 1.1%. Go ahead. Housing and construction were the big, were the areas where the impact was the greatest here in all of western Montana. You can see what the house price, or this is housing starts. Get the next slide. From this peak in 2005 to the trough in 2010, housing starts in Montana declined by almost 78%. Now, I've been dealing with economic data for almost 45 years. You almost never get a decline like this, a 78% reduction in housing starts from peak to trough during this recession. This recession is concentrated in the housing industry. And go to the next one. If you look at Ravalli County, again, it had an 82% decline in housing starts. So you can see how this recession is concentrated in the housing market. is a very complicated. Why is this recession taking so long to get out of? Well, it's because the recovery in housing keeps getting delayed. If we just look, this is U.S. housing starts. And what was the prediction for U.S. housing starts in 2011 that was made in 2008? The prediction was that there would be almost 1.3 million new housing starts in 2011, back when that forecast was made in 2008. Every year after that, notice how the U.S. forecasters have reduced their forecast for what's going to happen to housing starts nationwide. This is why this recession is taking so long, is that the recovery in housing has taken so long. So what's ahead for Missoula? This recession will end, but it's going to take a recovery in the housing market to do that. And this recovery in the housing market keeps getting pushed further and further into the future. What will Missoula's post-recession trend look like? Well, right now, the latest data kind of looks like we have had 4 straight years of decline in the Missoula economy. It could be that 2011 may turn out to be 0 or just slightly positive. We have not had 4 straight years of decline in the Missoula economy for the whole period that I was looking at it. Even in the mid-'80s, we had shorter periods of decline than that. But our forecast, as you'll see next Friday, will be that Missoula will probably continue, will grow, but we will continue to be less than the statewide average. And again, I kind of come back to that being the new realities of the Missoula economy. That we are no longer this rapidly growing area with many, many people from out of state moving here for a variety of reasons. You know, I was here during the early 1990s, and the primary concern in the early 1990s was how do we manage growth? How do we control things? Well, I think you have to be a little bit careful what you wish for, because that's exactly what we have right now. And the increased emphasis on economic development, especially in the city and county government, I think is one reflection of this new reality to Missoula's economic growth. And forecasting is a humbling business. That's Pat's slide. I would never say that. Now, I think many of you out there are thinking you're really smart. Let's go hear Polson and Barkey today, then we don't have to go to the Outlook seminar next Friday. We figured that out. So none of the material that I presented today will be covered in next Friday's Outlook seminar, and I certainly invite all of you to come to that event. It will be held next Friday, a week from tomorrow, at the Hilton Garden Inn. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Paul. So here's what I want you to take away. Learn from the past. What's in our past? In our past are resources. Our water resources, our incredible quality of life, our forests, our wildlife, the place where we live, the place that we hold dear. We're not so much resource-based in terms of pulling timber out of the hills, refining them into lumber, and shipping them outside the community, whether that's lumber or paper. We are still very much, our bright spot still is resources, the places where we live, right? Housing may be important to the national economy and it may be important to our economy, but as we plan for the future, so as we learn from the past, we're going to plan for the future. And planning for the future is Missoula is going to continue to attract people. Our comparative advantage is the place where we live, our environments, okay? But also, right, our workforce. That younger population, which is in the city of Missoula, and there's some of our counselors over there, but training that workforce, which is what Wolf does and what our Chamber of Commerce works to do in terms of leadership, so that as we imagine, and that's the third part of the equation, learn from the past, plan for the future, and imagine. So as we imagine our future and the comparative advantage that Missoula, Montana has as the rest of the nation looks at us, It's our resources and our environment, our water resources, which other people tend to take advantage of, but we're not going to, because we need it, don't we, Grant, for our quality of life, right? And we need it for business. We're a group of business people. We do think we're pretty smart, Paul. We know we're pretty smart, right? Because we are imagining our future, right? And how we're going to be competitive with a well-trained workforce, right? And resources for our community to grow as we may plan and decide to grow. And that's a perfect segue, almost, for how we manage our resources. And in this case, how we manage our water supply. And so our next speaker is John Kappas. John is the Chief Executive Officer for Mountain Water Company. He was born in Missoula and is a graduate of the University of Montana. There's a theme here, isn't there? John has worked for Mountain Water Company since 1990. He began working part-time in the operations department. He then worked as coordinator of rates. John was then promoted in 2001 to assistant general manager. In mid-2006, his position expanded as an advisor to Mountain Water Company's parent company, Park Water. He was involved in strategic planning. He's held director position on the Park Water Board and is a director for Mountain Waters Board. He is currently on the board of directors of the Missoula Area Chamber of Commerce. In his off time, John enjoys Montana with his wife and his son and competes at the national level in jumping his horses. John Kappas, Mountain Water Company, Park Water Company, executive officer, member of multiple boards, and young man about town. Where'd he go?
Right. You scared me off the stage.
Technology.
Well, thank you, Nick. That was a very nice introduction. I think. Let's see if this microphone will. I think you covered it all. About all I've got. So. Let's see, and I'm trying to work this microphone as well. So I was talking to John and Paul, and we were looking at different business plans, the organizations that we represent today. And Paul said, you know, our business plan is very difficult. We have to get students to come into the university, and now we have online, the computers, we're competing against that. It's a difficult business plan anymore for the university. John and I both nodded. That seemed difficult. But then I said, you know, the water industry has its challenges as well. I said, we actually have to sell what God gives away for free. And it's apparent out here today. It's coming down, but in a kind of solid state. And they both nodded. And then John Brower looks at me and he said, you guys don't have anything on the chamber. He said, look at what we have to sell. We have to get people to come in, buy tickets to listen to an economist and an accountant. So I want to...
Wait, we sold those tickets also.
And you did. And so a big round of applause to the chamber for putting on this and all the staff time. So today I'm here to talk about the impact of water on Missoula and our businesses. As business leaders, you know this is a resource that affects each of your enterprises and the overall economics of our city. Perhaps more importantly, as residents, each of us know the criticality of being able to turn on the faucet and have clean, safe water. In addition, we know the criticality of having proper fire protection for our businesses and throughout the community. So to talk about what's going to happen with water in 2012, we should review what has happened the past 13 months. Although much of this was reported in the news, a good overview of the issues and results will help set the stage for Mountain Water and our community's future. In late December 2010, Mr. H.H. Wheeler, Jr., the owner of Park Water, which owns Mountain Water Company, agreed to sell Park to an entity called Western Water. Western Water is essentially owned by the Carlyle Group, a private equity company. The Carlyle Group has an infrastructure fund which invests in water and transportation, primarily here in the U.S., focusing on public-private partnerships with state and local governments. In December of that year, 2010, the week the transaction was signed, members of Carlyle, led by Robert Dove, the head of the infrastructure fund, came to Missoula and met with Mayor Engen, the management of Mountain Water Company, and made calls to each and every one of our public service commissioners. Carlisle made it very clear to the community that nothing at Mountain Water would significantly change. There'd be no layoffs, management would stay the same, and the rate filing timing would stay the same. And I would, Nick talked about workforce in Missoula, and so I have to point out over here, special thanks to my employee group, or a part of them. The rest of them are out still serving water today. They make it possible for us to continue to serve this great community. So workforce is important to us. And so it was good to hear nothing was going to change in that regard. Because Park Water Company is in California, the California Public Commission had to approve the sale, which it did this past November. And that was in a standard amount of time. Park Water is not the only private water utility in California, and it has a record and a reputation with PSC as a professional, well-run utility, so approval was expected. As we know here in Missoula, there was some history with the city and Mr. Wheeler. In the past, the city had wanted to buy the water company from Mr. Wheeler, and the process had not gone well then for the city through its condemnation attempts. Now this year, the city believed for this sale to proceed, the Montana Public Service Commission should also look at the sale, and it filed as an intervener with the Public Service Commission. They were later joined by the Clark Fork Coalition, which had voiced some concern about how water rights owned by Mountain Water would be handled in this sale. In the meantime, Carlisle met with stakeholders here in Missoula and Helena to tell people they would see little change in Mountain Water. They met regularly with the mayor, state legislators, members of city council, environmentalists, the staffs of federal officials, the editorial board of the Missoulian, and of course, some of you. Jim Foley, who's with the university and our biggest customer, they met several times with to listen to the views of the university and to assure Jim and the university that they had no plans to change how the system operated. So then the Public Service Commission had a hearing in Missoula here during September, and several people took the opportunity to talk about how the water system should be sold to the city. And I'll talk about that, have a few words later. Robert Dove from Carlisle came, and along with myself, we testified, again explaining that little would change with this transaction. Before the hearing, Carlisle, the City of Missoula, and Clark Fork Coalition came to agreement about the outstanding issues the city had regarding future sales and the coalition had regarding water rights. Essentially, Carlisle agreed to preserve the water rights as they now are and to give the city a genuine opportunity to purchase the system in the future when Carlisle wants to sell it. At the hearing, both the city and the coalition spoke in favor of the sale. After the hearing, the issues with the Montana Consumer Council were worked out, and it reported no objections to the sale. This past December, the PSC voted to approve the sale, and the transaction occurred right before the holidays, nearly a year to the day when the sale was announced in 2010. Now, as we start out here in January 2012, what can we as chamber members and Missoula residents expect to happen to the water system to make sure when you turn on your faucet or a fire hydrant is needed, water comes out every time, and every time it is safe to drink or in the right volume to fight fires? The answer is the same as that which Carlisle told so many Missoulians last year and which was testified to the Public Service Commission. Not much. Mountain Water will continue to operate as it has. We will continue to run the system as in the past, and you will get your water as you always have. There will be some positive changes. Robert Dove has talked about making more capital available to Mountain Water to invest in the system and to see if we can make it more energy efficient and to give us more capability to address the leaking that occurs in our system. As Mr. Dove said, we will work with the PSC to make sure anything that we do is in concert with the Commission's views. You're also going to see an increased interest in Missoula by our parent company, Park Water, as evidenced by Park Water's president, Chris Schilling, being here today. Chris, welcome to all the snow. And I've been assured that Carlisle will continue as well to be a presence in the community. As Robert Dove promised, the Board of Directors of Western Water will be rotating their meetings between California and here in Missoula. So what you can expect to see is business as usual, with some increased visibility by our new owners and a commitment that Mountain Water continues to look for new and better ways of being a water company that serves Missoula. Now, some who support Mountain Water being sold to the city will be asking when it will give a chance for the city to buy Mountain Water. Now, that's certainly a question for Carlisle to answer, but I know since Robert Dove, the board, and Carlisle have just acquired the company and are focusing on the businesses and getting to know the park water utilities, their staff, their people, and their systems, I assume they want a chance to run the business before they think about selling something that they just acquired. But for today, with respect to converting a regulated utility to a municipally owned entity, I want to raise a few issues as an executive in the water industry for all of us as chamber members to consider whenever this issue is discussed in the long term. And as I just mentioned, Park Water and Mountain have just been purchased, and I don't believe are for sale, so I am going to raise these issues very generically. But I'm not leaning over on this mic here. I need to take a moment, though, because as Nick pointed out, I like horses, and Nick has horses. So Nick had this horse he had just bought, and it was a beautiful horse. I really liked it. So I said, Nick, I want to buy that horse. Nick looks at me and he says, John, no, you didn't say the horse isn't for sale. Actually, that was the other one. Nick, he actually said, John, I don't know, I just got the horse and it doesn't look right. And I looked at the horse and I'm like, wow, looks good to me, Nick. Nick's like, no, there's something about it that doesn't look right. He said, if you want to buy a horse, I've got this horse. Take a look at him. He's a real nice horse. And I looked at the horse and I'm like, no, Nick, that horse doesn't look right to me. So I want that horse. So Nick, he's okay if you want it. And I had to fork out big bucks to get it. And so I'd get it home, take it home, put my saddle on it, take off across the field, and bam, right into the side of the barn. I put the horse right back in the trailer. I'm back to Nick, and I'm like, Nick, you sold me a blind horse. And he says, John, I told you the horse doesn't look right. So, obviously that isn't a true story, because I know Nick has never sold anybody a blind horse, which they knew they got. And I try not to buy horses without getting them vetted. So I want to give a few things to consider as this community vets any future potential sale of Mountain Water. And so here's some information. First of all, water quality and quantity are regulated by the same agencies, regardless of ownership. So when Nick was talking about water rights in this community, those are regulated by the DNRC, and that will be the same under either ownership. Water quality, any water quality issues, any requirements for our system to meet water quality issues, they are regulated by the DEQ. So the primary difference between regulated utilities and municipally owned systems is the regulation of service and rates. The city government regulates the municipal owned system, while the state's Public Service Commission regulates privately owned systems. The two differences, though, in these areas of the ownership can have significant impacts on the taxpayer, the ratepayer, and the consumer. And for Missoula, most of the time, that's one and the same. Your businesses could be all three. You yourself as a resident could be all three. But then you can get different separations of that. You can have someone that's just a taxpayer in this community that isn't on our water system, but they're still affected as a taxpayer. You can have ratepayers, such as out-of-state landlords, that pay the rates, but I guess there would also be taxpayers, but not the actual consumer. And then you can have tenants who are consumers of the service, but not ratepayers or taxpayers. So it can be a mix of all those. So let's look first at the taxpayer, what some of the differences are under the ownerships. So for a regulated utility, the private owner assumes the financial risks of the operating system. So that's the private equity holder has the risk, and any infrastructure cash flow that is needed for the system is front-ended by the equity holder, and then the ratepayers pay that off over time. And the taxpayers also have a benefit with a regulated utility in that the regulated utility is a tax-paying entity for the community. Now, in a municipally owned system, the taxpayer then is the one that takes on the financial risks of the system. The taxpayers pay for or have to back the financing that's necessary to put in infrastructure until the ratepayers cover the funds. And then the municipal systems do not pay into the tax base. So those are a couple differences when you look at it from the taxpayer standpoint of how a change or the difference could affect you. If we look at the ratepayer, I already discussed that the rate setting process is regulated by the State Regulatory Commission, the Montana Public Service Commission, for a regulated utility. That's the requirement is for us. At any time we change rates, we have to go and get that approved by the Public Service Commission. And also expansion of our system and the costs associated with expansion into new areas is regulated by the Public Service Commission. The ratepayer under a regulated utility and in this process is represented by the state consumer agency in this state called the Montana Consumer Council, and that is created through the state constitution. Decisions of the PSC can be appealed to district court. And as I mentioned, the rates are regulated by the PSC, and all costs to run the utility are covered by the monthly fee that is charged to the ratepayer. So for the ratepayer in a municipal system, the difference is that the rate setting process is usually set through the city council as they choose and see fit. The ratepayers represent themselves in the process. And if there is any kind of disagreement, the city then would have to be taken to court in some sort of lawsuit, and that lawsuit could have expensive procedural rules. The city, through monthly fees, service fees, and connection fees, is how they will cover their costs, and those are levied by the city council. So that's a bit about the ratepayer, the difference. So let's look at the consumer. The service for the regulated utility is regulated as well by the Public Service Commission. So any complaints that the consumer has about the utility, first has to be handled by the utility if we can. If we can't come to a solution, then the MCC and the PSC step in and they resolve or mediate the issue. For the consumer under the municipal systems, the service is regulated by the owner, who is the city, and the complaints are handled by the city, and in most instances, that is as far as the process extends. Now, whenever there is talk about a private-owned utility, the issue of profits going to private parties is raised. And the specter of large hidden markups is often put out there. There's a strong tendency to forget that a privately owned utility is unlike most of your businesses. It is not free to operate in an open market and set its own prices. It is a tightly regulated business where each increase in price or increase in our rates must be approved by a state agency, the Public Service Commission. So how tightly regulated? Profit for a regulated utility is a return on capital invested in the infrastructure. If the utility does not operate efficiently, those inefficiencies cannot be passed on to the ratepayer. They must be paid by the owner through a reduced return. Also, any return is only based on the original investment in the infrastructure. And what that means there is that there isn't any kind of markup on any of the expenses that we have to operate. So today I've just touched on a few of the issues that would have to be discussed in any future consideration of converting Mountain Water Company to a city-owned utility. These issues and others could mean significant change to our community, our businesses, and our homes, and they ought to be thoroughly studied and vetted in a variety of stakeholder forums, and that should include businesses, including this chamber, the government, the citizens, the academic world, environmentalists, and various other stakeholders that are out there that our company and our service touches the lives of. And the discussion should be thoughtful and sound. If we limit ourselves to political and philosophical outlooks, as a community, we risk backing our way into potential problems, just like me and my unvetted horse. Now, those discussions, I'm going to assume, are far into the future. In the meantime, we at Mountain Water look forward to working with all sectors of the community on a number of issues, including these, and including what Nick touched on today about growth, how water rights affect that growth, and how we want to move forward as a community. And while we do that, we look forward under our new owners continuing to do what we do best, and that is provide Missoula with a service that delivers clean and safe water. Thank you.
I feel obligated to correct the story. Actually, that horse is a woman's horse, and if you'd let your wife ride it, there never would have been a problem with it, John. So I'm glad you gave it back, and Isabella and Rachel really enjoy it. It was never an eyesight problem. So while we're talking about horses, we have to have a positive outlook, right? And so they took a little optimist, about a 12-year-old kid, and a little pessimist, and they put the optimist in a room with all the latest toys and video games. And they took the pessimist and they put him in the same size room, and it was half full of horse manure. And they left him alone for 10 minutes. I'm going to leave you alone for 10 minutes here in a minute. And they came back to see how they were doing. And the little optimist with all the toys and the latest games was just not having any fun. They weren't the right games, the controllers didn't work right, the screens weren't appropriate, the transitions or transformers or whatever they are today weren't transforming correctly. So they went to the room a little pessimist, and there was horse manure all over the walls and the ceiling. And there was a kind of a hole about this big in the horse manure, and they started digging around in there, and they found some feet. They started pulling on the feet, and that little optimist was just digging in that horse manure as fast as he could, and he said, "What are you doing?" He said, "With all this horse manure," he said, "there's got to be a pony in here somewhere." All right? So you have 10 minutes. I need each table to formulate 2 or 3 questions. We'll come around with a microphone, and you can ask your questions to the speakers today, right? And then think about what we might do next year. Now, what I want you to remember is to learn from the past, plan for the future, and imagine. But I have a question. What's the one... Thanks, John. How's that? All right. Magic. All right. So where was I? What's the one thing, the one single thing that every person wants? What's the one thing? Happiness. No, that's part of it. Every single person, every single business person wants to control their own destiny, right? Is there anything more important to you? That's the most important thing, all right? So think about how you imagine your future and how you will control things. So you're controlling not just your destiny, but the future of this community. So you've got 10 minutes to write your questions, right? And then we'll do the question and answer. Thank you for your attention so far, and we'll be right back with you. Who wants to ask the first question?
Tom has the first question, sir.
Tom Sievertson, this table. Bill, right here.
What effect will mitigated water rights have on future development in the valley, Nick?
All right, so here's the deal. Water flows in the Clark Fork River, right? The water rights or the appropriations, if people can use water, are based on that flow rate. I said volume earlier. I should have said flow rate, okay? The flow rate of the Clark Fork in July, which is sort of an average one, is about 39,000 cubic feet per second, right? But people who have water rights have claims for all that water, whether it's a Vista or whether it's people that have existing water rights. I told you that yesterday, today, and tomorrow you could sink a well and take up to 35 gallons a minute, right? What if you have a new business that's going to have 22 employees and needs 20 gallons a minute, right, for a processing, right, operation? And you decide that you don't want to locate in Missoula where Mountain Water Company is, not because it has anything to do with Mountain Water Company, but you think your workforce is more closely associated and you sell your product better in a location between Lolo and Florence, right? So you decide to locate there. But you need more than 35 gallons a minute. You need 40 gallons a minute. You have to go find someone that has a water right, that is willing to sell you that water right for a price, and then you have to get that sale or mitigation approved, right, through the state of Montana, through a process which takes over a year and probably costs more than $100,000. So looking to the future and planning for the future, It looks very much like the exempted well, the 35 gallons a minute, which we've all enjoyed, may be going away or changing, right? But right now in this basin, for the last 4 years about, okay, you can't just go drill a well and get as much water out of it as you want. The rules have changed. So as we plan for our destiny, Tom, we have to think about the water resource that we have and how we use it to our best advantage overall. Okay? Does that answer that question? I'm not going to give you any more information on it, so it's going to have to suffice. Next question.
Is it on? I'm Noreen with Nature's Best, and one of our services is we mow a lot of lawns. And part of our strategic planning is to get people to do more xeriscaping or native scaping or gardening instead of the lawns, so that we can help our community not use as much water in watering those lawns. And when you talked about the domestic claims at 46%, I'm confused about then the 2% usage. I'm not sure what, would you explain that a little bit, what that means?
Well, I talked about two different things. I talked about the claims, the number of claims, okay? So lawns and homes and lawns are 46% of the total claims, but they only constitute 2% of the total water. They're very small claims. They're very small claims, all right? So if I'm going to water my lawn, maybe I'm using 8 gallons a minute when I water my lawn. That's typically what you'd use in a zone, okay? But an industrial processor might use 80 or 800 gallons a minute, right? And Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, which owns, was it 57, 52, I can't remember the exact percentages, right? That's for the beneficial use of fish, wildlife in the state of Montana. So they have a very small number of claims, but a very large volume of water, okay? But those of us who feel we're part of the equation, right, and want to control our destiny need to have a seat at the table, right? So appropriately, the water is applied in our communities the way it should be. Is there another question?
Nick?
Mike.
More to John Brower, if I may. John, about MEP and the relationship you're going to have there. Can you give us a little bit, as a chamber member, the type of reporting that we should be expecting, so that, like, how often are you going to meet? It includes, of course, city council as well as the county. So do you get to meet and have an audience on a regular basis? And what's the plan there more specifically, and how do you report back to our chamber members?
Thanks, Mike. Right now, the way it's structured, we have invited members of the Missoula Economic Partnership to attend our business and community development meeting, and they regularly do so. And so all of the minutes from those meetings, of course, we could make available to all of you as members. And in fact, I think we post a lot of those minutes, you know, even to the website. But we're currently really in the process of exploring opportunities of how we're going to be able to collaborate together and work together. One of the things that comes to mind right away is a mapping of services that we've talked about in that committee, where we're trying to identify what each of us do, what the chamber does best, what MEP does best, what MCDC does best, so that we can, you know, identify and channel those folks to the proper resources more quickly to get, you know, their answers to their questions and get things solved.
Next question.
4 random women sat at a table. One from First American Title, Missoula Building Industry Associations, Pierce Flooring, and the University of Montana. We decided, since you had an economist, you could assume that you would protect the water for us. And we would believe that recreation and environment are the 2 key issues that we've been dealing with, and we all are here for those reasons. What we wanted to know was, if we're going to be a viable economic entity here in Missoula with this out-migration that we're seeing, or, excuse me, growth at a slower rate, right, Paul? Is that the better way of saying it? We wanted to know what you were going to do about the transportation problem that's been really issuing a big challenge for us for years. Business development is very dependent upon transportation. We are talking about internal to Missoula and external to the state. And we still are, we have decreased air, we have problems with roads, we have internal, even the internal problem that we have on Reserve Street. Over and over again, we're saying business will do better with better transportation. We can protect our lifestyle if we have better transportation. We'll protect our water rights, and we're not going to do ferries and boats across the shore for the water. We want to keep that as our lifestyle commitment. So we'd like to know what the Chamber can do to help us with this big transportation issue.
So the one thing we can do, Mary Ellen, and thank you for the question and for the other folks at your table, is consider that for the topic of discussion next year, right? So I think that's a great thing to put on the table for that. I know you're disappointed I don't have an answer for you, but I think that's a very interesting question, and it's a discussion for the future, but very important. So we have a legislative division at the Chamber of Commerce. I chair that, and our Government Affairs Committee is working on supporting the Surface Transportation Act as we speak, concerned about how that works. And so on a day-to-day basis, we're looking at transportation at the local, state, and national level, and trying to inform our members and take appropriate action as the legitimate voice of business. Thank you. Other question? Jason? Bill, you got somebody over there? Yeah, Mr. Haynes.
Thank you, sir. I've got two questions. If a new business that designed and assembled and shipped a product wanted to come to Missoula but needed a campus area of, say, 10, 20 acres, where would we put their business in the Missoula vicinity? And when you have to answer that question, you have to consider open space, agriculture needs, recreation needs, subdivision needs, retirement homes, and lately this transportation question. You want to just deal with that one now?
Okay, yeah, sure. And how much time do I have? So it's a great question, Dick. We just did the very same thing with the Leadership Missoula class last week, some 43 students. And we showed them how Missoula was projected to grow, and they needed to figure out where people would grow. Under your scenario, I think there is property out near the Missoula County Airport that is both served by Mountain Water Company and Missoula City Sewer. It enjoys transportation connections via Airway Boulevard to Interstate 90 and West Broadway into the heart of Missoula, associated downtown and businesses, as well as the businesses that are along Reserve Street, which also is a connection down to South Avenue and catches us up to Southgate Mall. So short order, there are places available for that specific type of business within the municipal service area where we've planned for capital facilities. The city's done a great job of extending sewer, and Mountain Water Company's done a great job of extending water facilities. And so we've amended our growth policies out there, and we just have to change the zoning a tiny bit to accommodate that scenario. All right? Next question.
Hi, Nick. I have a question and a request. Right here.
I just need to find you. Hi, Steve.
My question for you is, what do you think the likelihood of the exempt well going away?
You know, Legislator Betsy Hands was at a recent public meeting and testified that the next legislative session would deal with that. In speaking with Mary Sexton, who's the division head of DNRC, and Alan English, who works in the Bozeman area, the exempt well is 35 gallons a minute, but no more than 10 acre feet, right? So 10 feet deep on 1 acre, 1 feet deep on 10 acres, I can go on forever in that combination. What they think is the exempt well will remain at less than 35 gallons a minute, but you're going to lose the total volume per year of 10 acre feet. That's one change that's predicted to come out of the next legislative session. Now that's the legislature, Steve. There have been at least one, if not two, significant court cases, and Brianna or Grant could probably speak to those better than I could. But the legislature can change the law relative to how we appropriate water or use water, so can the courts. Okay? So if someone feels aggrieved by exempt wells and decides to challenge that through the court system, then that could be a court ruling that changes the ability to get water the way we used to get water. Next question.
I have a request too.
Okay.
I would love to get home today and in my inbox see copies of these presentations.
You may be able to go to the Chamber webpage and take the effort to download. We'll see what we can do there. Thank you. Jason had a question here, though.
Thanks. On the water scope, so how much water does Mountain Water have the ability to pump from groundwater and surface water? What percentage of that are you using right now in order to supply Missoula's water? And how do decisions about the overall amount of water that's available factor into requests for new connections?
That's a very good question, Jason, and I probably would have to take about 15 minutes to answer it real well, so I'm going to give an overview of it, and then Ross Miller, our expert in water rights, maybe we could ask him to come back someday and speak on the actual details of it. But overall, we have two sources of water. We have the Rattlesnake Creek, which has about 55 CFS of water rights, and then we have our groundwater supply that I believe, Ross, help me out, it's a similar amount to that. So a real technical answer from me is, and so I'll address it real quick this way, is that we utilize both sources of water. The Rattlesnake Creek is a backup supply for this community should we lose our great groundwater supply. The water rights that we have, we are able to divert up to, it's about 69 million gallons per day. Our average use is 20 million gallons per day, and our peaking on a good hot August is been about 50 million. So that gives you an idea of how much we have for a diversion. But then on top of diversion for water rights, and you get into the consumptive issue, and your water rights are based on what the community consumes at this point in time. So that's kind of the limiting factor right now, is the consumptive portion of our water right. And so as we add on new businesses and residences, we will have to mitigate for that new consumptive component. So when we're talking about landscaping and that kind of thing, it does help this community in the long run. As we change our consumptive use, there's more water right available for new community members. So Jason, is that helpful? Okay, thank you.
So I think our time together is about up. The one thing that you are responsible for, truly, whether you want to or not, is your destiny. And your destiny is the most precious thing that you have. And your destiny is tied to the future of this community. And I encourage you all to be active, to educate yourselves on the issues, drive carefully, have a great day, and thank you to Culligan Water, to WGM Group, and to Partners Creative, and the Missoula Area Chamber of Commerce. Have a good day.
Thank you.